Islam has shaped much of the world's history for over a millennium. Its profound influence on culture, science, philosophy, and politics reached far beyond its Arabian birthplace, weaving into the fabric of societies across Africa, Asia, and Europe. The Islamic Golden Age spurred great innovations. Meanwhile, the rapid spread of it along with the Arabic language assimilated countless cultures throughout the Middle East. But what if Islam had never existed? What if the Arabian Peninsula never united under the banner of a single faith, but instead remained a diverse and fragmented region? That is what I will attempt to answer in this video. So following the Roman Sassanid Wars, there is no Islamic Caliphate to take advantage of the weakened empires. Instead, we have a much more diverse Arabia, split between countless tribes that follow Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Arabian polytheism. This, however, does not mean there would be no major repercussions from the Eastern Romans and Sassanids beating each other to a pulp. While there isn't a cohesive political entity like the early Islamic Caliphate to swoop in and reshape the whole Middle East, the now war-torn and barely defended Egypt, Levant, and Mesopotamia would be extremely vulnerable to raids and even conquests by smaller neighboring Arab tribes. In the west, Egypt faces invasions from the Nubian kingdoms and the Arab Ghassanids tribe. Facing threats on all sides, Patriarch Benjamin I of Alexandria and prominent local landowners across Egypt come together to elect the Ghassanid ruler King of Egypt, introducing a third major power to the region for the first time in millennia. Further east, the Lakhmids, an Arab tribe and vassal of the Sassanids, declare independence and try to carve out an empire as well. For the first time in centuries, the Middle East is no longer a Roman-Persian playground, but home to its own homegrown powers. Further west, much of North Africa remains under Rome for the time being, with the remainder being divided between many Christian Berber tribes and petty kingdoms. The region broadly develops a unique blend of North African Romance, Greek, and Berber cultures. Italy faces the Lombard invasions and is decimated, but with Rome being stronger, it retains a firmer grasp on the peninsula and the city of Rome than in real life. Rather than becoming a complete administrative mess, central and southern Italy remain under the Roman Empire, while the north is under Lombard control. In Iberia, the Visigothic kingdom is never conquered by an Islamic Caliphate. Instead, the Visigothic kingdom survives for a bit longer. It was, however, plagued by internal divisions and strife and would succumb to these divisions as local nobles and lords became more powerful than the Visigothic king. In this power vacuum, several kingdoms rise and vie for power in Iberia, while the Frankish kingdom expands and takes advantage of the power vacuum. Instead of being characterized by the Islamic Golden Age, the following several centuries are a continuation of the Roman-Persian rivalry, now with an additional major player, Egypt. This is a completely different world. Persian Zoroastrian religion and civilization remain prominent and distinct, in some sense taking the place of Islam, perhaps also translating and reviving many ancient works. The Eastern Roman Empire still loses a lot of power and influence, but broadly speaking, retains more power, as the newly independent Egypt and the surviving Persian Empire do not pose as existential a threat as the various caliphates. The Franks rise to prominence, but Charlemagne is never crowned Roman Emperor, as much of Italy and importantly Rome and the Pope, for the time being, are still under Eastern Roman rule. In this world, the Normans still arrive in southern Italy and North Africa and establish their own kingdom. While Rome, or Rhomania as it would be called with time, is much stronger, it still couldn't entirely defeat the Normans, especially with its focus being more on its east, where it constantly fought the Persians and Egyptians and now had to deal with the Seljuk Turks. Rhomania keeps more of Italy for longer, while the Normans focus more of their attention on the south. The Norman kingdom eventually adopts the name Kingdom of Ifrica after the old Roman province, and the Normans themselves gradually adopt the Ifrican language, a form of vulgar Latin much like French and Spanish in the real world. Meanwhile, the Turks do not see as much success. A stronger Rome does not mean it simply wins all its wars, but it does mean its defeats are less severe, so the Turks don't conquer all of Anatolia, instead staying throughout Persia, adopting Zoroastrianism, mostly assimilating into Persian culture, but still becoming a majority cultural and linguistic group in a region roughly corresponding to where modern Azerbaijani Turks live. Meanwhile, European civilization looks entirely different, as instead of the Holy Roman Empire, we have the feudal and disunited Germany that mirrors France of the real world. France itself, meanwhile, is much stronger, having kept more of its holdings in Iberia, thanks in part to the squabbling Iberian kingdoms, but also to its more numerous and consolidated neighbors very early in its history, posing more of a threat than the real-world HRE. This led to the French centralizing power earlier than in real life. The Mongol invasions still happen much like in the real world. They decimate Central Asia and the Persian Zoroastrian world, using Turkic tribes as puppet allies much like in real life. The aftermath of the Mongol invasions is where we see the more significant change, as its successor states adopt Zoroastrianism. The Ilkhanate, while led by Mongols and Turks, continues Persian and Zoroastrian traditions as they gradually assimilate. Their push into eastern Anatolia would be relatively short-lived, as the Ilkhanate would not long after collapse to internal conflict. In wake of this collapse, in the region of Fars, historically the heartland of ancient Persian dynasties, a charismatic nobleman named Ardashir, claiming descent from the ancient Sassanid kings, begins to unite local Persian lords under his banner. With the support of the Zoroastrian clergy, who proclaim him a divine protector of Asha, Ardashir gathers a formidable army composed of local Persian warriors and Zoroastrian militias. By rallying Persian cities under the promise of restoring Persian glory and protecting the Zoroastrian faith, he gradually reunifies Persia. To the north, the Rus develop quite differently, as the ever-persistent Rhomania maintains a lot of influence in the region. As the Golden Horde weakens, and the introduction of gunpowder makes steppe tribes less formidable, this mostly benefits the Poles and Romans, with only Vychehrayna, a Rus republic centered around Novgorod, remaining as an independent Rus power. To the west, the Iberian kingdoms have been consolidating, and a growing Ifrican empire, having conquered much of Mauritania, begins to look for alternate trade routes around its Egyptian and Roman rivals, establishing settlements on the Canary Islands, and eventually by accident discovering the Americas, much like in real life. This leads to a rush to settle the continent, as Old World diseases devastate the locals and make the land ripe for the taking. Back in the Old World, meanwhile, both Rhomania and the newly re-established Persian Empire under a Persian dynasty are seeing a sudden rise in power, as the Mongol successor states quickly succumb to new gunpowder weapons and strategies. The two ancient empires, alongside Poland and Vychehrayna, in a process almost mirroring the colonization of the Americas, expand and establish settled civilization in the previously horde-dominated steppe. Taurika in particular, Rhomania steppe territories, would develop a very unique culture due to its separation from the rest of the empire across the Black Sea, as well as its very different landscape and diverse demographics. Another major shift that would have been unfolding over the past millennium is the decentralization of Christianity. By this time, it would have reached its natural conclusion, with each kingdom and empire primarily managing their church affairs internally and independently. Although the Patriarch of Rome was once acknowledged as a ceremonial figurehead, theological differences gradually diminished his influence over churches in regions like England, Germany, and Sweden. Instead of a Protestant Reformation, as seen in real history, which was driven by the Catholic Church's overreach, this world experiences a steady decentralization of Christianity after the decline of Rome in the West. Consequently, religious administration becomes more localized, allowing for greater freedom of information in some regions. This decentralization, combined with advancements in technology such as the printing press, which enabled the rapid dissemination of information, spurred the emergence of a scientific revolution, particularly in Western Europe. This accelerated technological development, and along with the colonization of the Americas, led to the gradual decline of established powers like Rhomania, Egypt, and Persia, which struggled to adapt to these changing circumstances. This trend would continue gradually for centuries, with Western powers and nationalist revolutions chipping away particularly at Rhomania territory. However, Western worldwide domination would not continue forever. Taurika, the former Romanian steppe territories, split off in the mid-1800s during a nationalist Republican revolution, inspired by the success of republicanism in Vychehrayna. Unlike its mother nation, Taurika would very successfully adapt to the New World Order and technological advancements. As another Greek-speaking Roman-descended civilization, Taurika's success triggers serious reform in Rhomania. By the early 1900s, along with the other empires of old, Rhomania begins rapid industrialization, suddenly changing the geopolitical climate and ending Western hegemony. A continent-spanning Great War takes place in the wake of this, as the Western powers desperately try to hold on to power. A stable peace follows, as a more sustainable balance of power is established with Rhomania and its allies' victory. By the modern day, the most powerful entities in the Old World are as follows. The Occidental Union, formed out of the surviving Western powers, mainly as a means of defending against the resurgent Rhomania. Rhomania, of course, is perhaps the strongest it has been since the fall of the West. Both these powers each stand as the leaders in the Western world, with a clear divide within it being between the Romanian-influenced West and the Frankish, French, and later Occidental Union-influenced West. Persia, which following the Great War kicked the Egyptians out of Arabia, liberated the majority Zoroastrian population, and re-established itself as a major world power, and of course center of the Zoroastrian world, which to some extent has replaced the Islam of our world. Egypt, which saw a major setback during the Great War, still extends its influence across East Africa. And Japan, which adapted much more quickly than China to industrialization and Western influence, carved out an empire and settled large swaths of land on the eastern steppe before China eventually became strong enough to oppose it. The Americas, meanwhile, are also quite interesting. North America is home to several important world and regional powers, with the United Provinces being on par with the major powers of the Old World, having benefited greatly from its isolation. The same can be said of the less powerful but still relevant Argentina, originally colonized by Africa, but later seized by Lusitania after Africa lost its Mauritanian territories. Broadly speaking, Latin America in this world is much more stable than in real life, as without the same mentality shaped by the Reconquista, the Iberian kingdoms and Africa dealt with their colonies in an entirely different way, not being quite as harsh, more reminiscent of other European powers, which resulted in more stable and successful societies developing. But that's about all for now. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and a big thank you to all my channel members. See you next time.